it's the three of us and familiar faces. Um, I just restoring the slides in this hangout. But I was just curious before we start if there's anything in particular you are hoping to get out of this training, because there are certain things that I can kind of emphasize or not. So I was just curious before we get started.
I'm here to learn. That's my
Here to learn?
whatever you want to teach me, it's probably going to be more than I know right now.
One
Hey,
thing
it
that
works
one
for
thing that
me.
hey Sasha, it's me Patrick.
Hey, Patrick.
Hi.
Hi.
One thing that maybe I'm not sure if today would be a good time, but self-care after being cyberbullied.
Ooh.
Yeah,
That's
that's
actually I hadn't been I hadn't thought of that specifically, but that's definitely something that I think would be applicable to a training like this, and I could definitely uh, get more information about.
awesome. Thank
So
you.
yeah, definitely. So just to kind of give you an overview as I'm loading these slides back up, um, the presentation is kind of going to be broken up into three parts. So I know that this is going to be tape too, so why don't I introduce myself to everybody? Hey, Kieran.
Hi.
So, and there she goes. So, my name's Sasha Kaufman, and I'm a licensed social worker in Massachusetts, also state lead here. And I have been working on seeing how the community organizing we do can be therapeutic, not only for participants, but also kind of enhance our lives, not only through the advocacy and activism that we do, but also as a way to kind of act back on systems that have acted upon us as LGBTQ people. So I'm kind of going to start off about what it means to be Eddie just joined us. What it means to be um, to the LGBTQ movement and how it relates to self-care. Then I'll give some examples of um, organizationally how Get Equal's done a really great job in making it trauma informed, and also ways that both as like state leads and as an organization we can continue to foster resilience in the people that we work with and the LGBTQ community at large. So with that, I will start the slides. All right, so do this.
Oh, we lost Sasha.
Oh no.
I was on mute, Karen, and you were asking me a question earlier, and I was answering, but I was on mute.
Oh, sorry. Because Bex really likes neck tattoos. And because you asked about her tattoo earlier, so I was like, oh, sure, your neck tattoo, but she's not in the room anymore.
The only one I have is this paw print. Hold on, which side is it on?
Oh, nice.
But
We're
I'm
also we're also live on YouTube, so just so that everyone knows.
cool. And and then this is my new Get Equal tattoo
Yeah.
for
Oh
life.
yeah.
It was originally just an equal sign, and I was like, I need to fix this ASAP. And then I'm wearing a shirt sponsored by somebody. that you guys are familiar with. That's how I'm gonna cover it.
Maybe I should call Sasha, huh?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Felipe, I was on mute and I was asked, you were coughing. I was like, "Are you still feeling sick?" And then I was like, "Oh, I'm on mute."
I'm much better than I was. That's for
Oh,
sure.
okay, that's
Yeah.
good.
All right. Sorry about that. Apparently it wasn't letting me show it on here directly, but now I am on my computer itself, so I'll just do it like that. All right. Alrighty, great. All right, there we go.
Oh, I like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Loading on up. So, as I said before, overview, what is trauma-informed organizing and self-care, and organizational lessons and state lead suggestions. So we went over kind of what we're hoping to get out of this. So to start off with, I'm hoping to make this conversation more of a, you don't have to know a lot of terms or background on the topic of trauma or how organizing can be therapeutic. But I kind of just wanted to pick a definition to start off with. So this is from like the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Agency with the government, and they list it as the results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or threatening, produces lasting negative effects on the individual's functioning and physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. So I just kind of wanted to include that so we understand, what I mean when I talk about trauma or traumatic scenarios. Those are the types of things that it includes. So what does it mean to be be trauma-informed in organizing? It's the idea of organizing with the knowledge that organizers and community members may have experienced and or continued experience violence and oppression. So I think about it particularly with the work that we do is that we're working for our full federal equality. We're working to keep our families together, keep our families from being deported. It's not that it's something that will change overnight. So the oppression that we're fighting are the oppressions that we're experiencing as it's going on, which is when, as I'll go into, when we talk about our story of self, why it's important to kind of give ourselves and our organizers the tools so that way if stories are being told that maybe are still ongoing or haven't been fully processed, which the brain needs to do in order to recognize them as memories, that we're doing the things that we can to keep things as healthy as possible. And it's also working to make organizing an empowering experience for some experience that increases one's exposure to trauma. So I'll go into that a little bit more in terms of what we're doing right organizationally, that's helping to maintain that, to have it be a safe space for people. So as I said, why is the trauma-informed organizing important? So for instance, for LGBTQ people, we're at greater risk of exposure to violence institutionally and interpersonally. So if you think about, statistically speaking, and so on and so forth, more likely to experience, homelessness, and institutionally, you can even see how us fighting for our basic needs and non-discrimination protections are ways to kind of decrease that violence towards us that are happening institutionally. Also, they're less likely to have access to supports and resources to overcome the impact of trauma. So what that means is having community, having access to basic needs, and as it says below, the impact of multiple oppressions influence that. So I like to reference the National Transgender Survey that the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force did a couple of years ago, and what it found was that there's increased amount of violence, of survival, or underground economies, poverty, of trans women of color that made them more susceptible to being put or exposed to violence. So it's the type of thing where you're more likely to be exposed to those traumatic, stressful events, and the more you're exposed to them, the more likely you are to develop more serious situations and things such as like post-traumatic stress disorder, which you may hear about, which is more so a set of criteria that, unless you have the expertise, you're not really able to diagnose. But as I'll say later on in the presentation, that's why it's important to kind of give out these resources to your organizers, so that way they have those tools in case they need to use them. So as I mentioned before, there's actually, I love that we use the story of self, and especially with the LGBTQ movements, it shows that you know someone who identifies as such, you're more likely to be supportive on a range of issues. But what happens when you are traumatized is the treatment is to processing traumatic memories in a safe environment that the brain never got around to computing. So what do I mean by that? It means that unless you have processed the events that have happened, your brain is basically having a normal reaction to having a very stressful event where your life was threatened. And unless your brain gets to a point where it can be safe again, so the hormones in your brain can work the way that it normally would to process a memory, anytime you're reminded of that, you can instantly be brought back to that moment and feel that your life is in fear, even if you aren't there, and logically you might know, oh, well, I'm not necessarily in a place where I should be fearing my life. So why I bring that up in terms of story of self is sometimes our stories of self describe the violence and oppression we face as LGBTQ people. So if you haven't had a chance to have a safe space to kind of work through that, it might bring up a lot of feelings and a lot of unresolved hurt, and what should be helpful would be to be able to give out information so people know what to do if that's the case, if they feel those feelings. And I'll get into the solution for that later on. It's important for organizers' self-care to have this awareness and resources, as I said. So lastly, it also encourages healing through reestablishing community and reestablishing a sense of control and power. What I mean by that is a lot of times, as whether it's what's called collective trauma, so a whole group like LGBTQ people have experienced oppression or trauma on a more systematic level. By reestablishing a community, you're reestablishing a sense of power together. And also, a lot of the times that feeling of powerlessness and is very common with people who experience trauma, whether it's interpersonally or through the systems we navigate through. So it allows us to act back on a system that has acted upon the organizer. It also encourages prevention of activist burnout. And I took a lot of the parallels between trauma-informed organizing and what is seen a lot with social workers doing work with people who are experiencing traumatic situations or have been survivors of trauma. And what it finds is that younger, more new to the profession social workers tend to really experience vicarious trauma more. They get to, even when hearing about it, they might start seeing the symptoms that other people who actually experienced the trauma might have gone through. And what happens with that is because you hear it so much, it ends up impacting the person who's trying to be the caretaker, or the person who's trying to help in my case, their clients. So I could very much see this as how state leads can be impacted by the work that they do, about how much is on their backs. And so that's why I think this will be very helpful in encouraging the prevention of activist burnout. So here are a few of the recommendations that I have. So in terms of organizationally, there's and I had sent these slides out last week, but I can send, I made 1 or 2 changes, so I can send these out to you 3 as well. Sanctuary model is a set of guidelines for organizations to help foster empowerment and healing and decrease the adverse impacts of trauma. What it really focuses on is an importance of a nonviolent stance. So as I said, experiencing repeated violence and oppression increases the likelihood of developing negative effects to the trauma. So I think it's really important that we have the nonviolence stance from a trauma-informed organizing practice point of view. Also is horizontal decision-making structure. I remember when Get Equal, we started to really start working through that and implementing that more when Felipe came on board. And I thought that it was really great because it was right around the time I was learning more about this, and that I thought it was it made me realize how we were being really aware of giving as much power and autonomy to our organizers as we could, and that, again, that helps restore a sense of self, which is important after going through trauma and ongoing kind of disempowerment on numerous levels, whether it's through our interpersonal relationships or from the policies that we're trying to fight to change. The other part I like is we've talked about with the 2-year limit of state lead position. It helps to prevent burnout because there's a way to kind of have the person recharge. And also something that I wanted to suggest was a diversity in tasks and ways to engage with the organization can help decrease activist burnout. What I mean by that is if organizers have multiple sets of skills, yes, having them have one specific duty is good, but also having like a wide range of experiences and opportunities within that, even for a volunteer position, can be really helpful, because that diversity and change in experience makes it where
Oh, dang, we lost Sasha.
We lost her.
Let me see if I can call them.
That might work better.
Yeah.
Can you ask them to send the slides again, and then that way we'll have it.
Sure. Sure.
Look at my other new tattoo.
Well,
Me and Jorge got matching thumb tattoos.
that's nice.
Oh, it's upside down, but my wrist doesn't turn like that. I'm trying to put it. We're anchored down together.
Hmm.
Put something funny on yourself.
No.
For a minute, I thought you had something, but that's your poster behind. From far away, I thought you were putting something.
Hmm.
I want to see the tiara. Yay!
And we're back. Hello. Thank you for your patience. I am incredibly sorry. I am now going to jump back in where I left off. But before I start, does anyone have any questions about what I've gone over so far? I know I've kind of packed a lot in there, but I hope it's pretty forward in terms of kind of the background and the reasoning behind the recommendations I've thought of. Great. So. Great. So the next point I wanted to bring up in terms of recommendations is kind of the solutions part of what I've been discussing. So my recommendation is kind of doing a resource sharing. So share resources on mental health and basic needs services in your state when teaching the story of self with new organizers. So the thinking and reasoning behind that is so as I talked about before, the best way to kind of treat trauma is to be able to process the memories. Well, one of the things that research has shown over the years is in order to even get to that step, you have to feel safe and have your basic needs met in order to even start that process. Now, for people who are enduring and experiencing oppression on an ongoing basis, achieving as what they deem as quote-unquote stability and not having the same traumatizing experiences happening might not be an option. By sharing the resources for the mental health and basic needs services, that I'll give reasons why that's helpful, but in terms of thinking of it in a culturally competent way, I know that there are different cultures who have different experiences with accessing mental health services, and a lot of different stigma and cultural norms around accessing mental health services. So I included basic need because even if a person doesn't feel comfortable getting counseling, at least they can start having their basic needs met if that's one of their challenges. And it also shows that you're being helpful with your organizers and you care about them. So a case example that I thought of is someone who, organizer who comes in, you go over their story of self, and you can tell that it was I remember I heard a story of self about homeless youth here in Boston who had experienced being assaulted because he was living on the street, and I could tell that he could tell the story, but he was getting really shaken up about it, and that the more he told it, the more confident he got, but it was really hard for him the first couple of times because it was just so real and raw to him. And my idea is to see what type of services he had, and what supports he had, because support helps a lot too. And that's why I think it's really great that as Get Equal also does one-on-ones and really checks in with organizers. So that's kind of an example of like someone who might benefit from it, where you can tell that they can't. Bottom line is basically it's hard for them to tell it just as a story, but it's like a range between that and maybe even telling it where they're so removed from it that there's not that passion there. So those are kind of the two extremes, or the two polar sides of someone who might be had experienced that as a traumatic experience and might need some help. But with the benefits of giving out this information, it helps to normalize the effects of trauma without singling anyone out. So as I said before, the adverse effects of trauma, negative effects, it's a completely normal response from your brain. So by giving out information to everybody, you're normalizing the experience of the type of lives that we've lived, the lived experiences we've fought for, and what has brought us to this this passion. Because I speak to so many people and I've heard so many stories of self that really are rooted in this resilience and this bouncing back from oppression and trauma. And so I feel that this is really helpful to have this knowledge. And there are ways to just look up local mental health centers or places that could be advanced support for organizers who are having trouble with trauma. It also promotes self-determination, which is important for survivors who have had their sense of control taken away. And as I said before, it shows that you care about your organizers' well-being. So the last thing I wanted to go over that I thought was really helpful is what's called the self-care assessment worksheet. And I think this is where maybe that whole thing about being cyberbullied, or I've thought of this even with, say in Texas after San Antonio. I remember hearing like Tiffany and people talk about how it was 50 of you against 400 or so haters, and how is it that you can take care of yourself after a day of telling your story of self and being vulnerable, so that way people can hear you and you can change minds and hearts, but you have people telling you you're going to go to hell and you're, worthless for the fight that you're fighting. So I'm going to show you this self-care assessment sheet, but some of the benefits are, why reinvent the wheel when you and your organizers can build off strengths you already possess? So that's going to be one for you to keep in mind while I bring it up. Okay. Can everybody see it? Yes? Okay, cool. Awesome. So this was taken from, remember how earlier I talked about vicarious trauma? Well, this was taken from a book that has a bunch of different activities for mental health professionals to take care of themselves. Because I know for me, as not only just in activism itself and the work I do at Get Equal, but as being a social worker, there are days when I feel so drained from hearing everyone's stories and trying to be an advocate to help my clients. And so this is something for me personally that's been helpful. So you can, what it is it asks you to use the scale below, rate the following areas in terms of frequency. So there are different ways that you can kind of look at it where you can rate it 1 to 5 and pick one that you enjoy in each group. So the group is physical self-care, psychological self-care, emotional self-care, and spiritual self-care, workplace or professional self-care. So this one could actually be applied for Get Equal. So you could even replace workday as time you set aside for doing your activism work. And then the last one is balance. So the strive for balance within your work life and work day and relationships, play, and rest, which are kind of go over the other categories that are mentioned above. So with that, let me bring it back to. So as I said before, you can go through it and see what activities you like, what activities you might want to try more, what's worked in the past. So why, you can just, instead of trying to develop new skills, which it gives you the potential to do, it also allows you to tap into things that you enjoy right away. It offers helpful suggestions you can try out. I know for me, when I'm overwhelmed or if I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling really bad or drained after doing activism work, it's really helpful to have a list of activities that I enjoy doing that I can go to, and I don't have to do a lot of thinking behind it. I can just do it, and I know it's there. I can almost pull it out of my pocket and know what I can choose from depending on how much time I have or what I think would be the most recharging. So those are the ideas that I have based on what we're doing right and things that we can maybe incorporate more. So with that, I open it up for any questions or comments. So here we go. Great. So does anyone want to, are you on mute, Felipe? Are you trying to talk?
I was just gonna ask if you could send us the spreadsheet that you showed, for the survey, I mean.
Yeah, yeah. It. I'll after this training, I'll send out the updated slides because I added in one or two other things as well as yeah the checklist here.
Hmm. Yes, that'll be
Um,
good.
yeah, definitely. Anything else? Any other questions or comments? Great. Well then, thank you so much for participating. I hope that this was somewhat helpful. And I also wanted to extend that if either of you want information in your area or in your state about mental health services, please let me know and I can send that along to you and do some research into that. So I want to offer that to you because I know I mentioned that as a suggestion, but I really do think it shows organizers that you care about them. It normalizes how doing this work can impact you. And while not singling a person out or kind of turning away an organizer if you think they're kind of too shaken up to be able to do their story of self.
Thank
Great. Thanks, you two, or you three. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, Sasha.
you.
You're
Bye.
welcome.
Good
Thank
night.
you.